This video short will review the difference between the displacement status at time of report versus stage of displacement at time of incident. These are two data points in the GBVIMS intake and initial assessment form. Displacement status at time of report is a data point found in Section 1, Survivor Information, while stage of displacement at time of incident is a data point found in Section 3, Details of the Incident. Displacement status at time of report indicates the displacement status of the survivor at the time of the report, meaning when she presents herself to a caseworker to seek services. There are 7 displacement categories provided in the intake form that a caseworker can choose from. These are asylum seeker, foreign national, internally displaced person, or IDP, returnee, resident, refugee, and a stateless person. Let's take a moment to define each category. An asylum seeker is an individual who is seeking international protection. In countries with individualized procedures, an asylum seeker is someone whose claim has not yet been finally decided on by the country in which he or she has submitted it. Not every asylum seeker will ultimately be recognized as a refugee, but every refugee is initially an asylum seeker. A foreign national is a person present in a country who does not currently have the right to permanent residency of that country. An internally displaced person, or IDP, is a person who has been forced to flee his or her home as a result of or in order to avoid the effects of armed conflict, internal strife, systematic violations of human rights, or natural or man-made disasters, and who seeks protection elsewhere within his or her country of origin or residence, and has not crossed internationally recognized state borders. A refugee is a person who is outside his or her country of origin or habitual residence and has a well-founded fear of persecution because of his or her race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion, and is unable or unwilling to avail him or herself of the protection of that country or to return there for fear of persecution. A returnee is a former refugee or IDP who returns to his or her country or area of origin, whether spontaneously or in an organized manner. A person who has been displaced from their home as a result of or in order to avoid the effects of armed conflict, internal strife, systemic violations of human rights, or natural or man-made disasters is referred to as a resident. And finally, a stateless person is a person who, under national laws, does not have the legal bond of nationality with any state. Article 1 of the 1954 Convention relating to the status of stateless persons indicates that a person not considered a national or citizen automatically under any laws of that state is stateless. Now let's look at a few examples and see if you can test your knowledge and correctly assign each survivor her status of displacement at time of report. Example number 1. Asma is forced to leave her village in order to escape escalating violence. She goes to her brother's house in the capital. Which of the categories describes Asma's status of displacement at time of report? If you said IDP, you are correct. Scenario 2. Aisha tells you that she has asked for international protection from UNHCR. She says they have not yet given her an answer about her case. Which of the categories best describes Aisha's status of displacement at time of report? The correct answer is asylum seeker. Scenario 3. Aliyah, who is Syrian, decides to take a job offer in Saudi Arabia in order to avoid being forced to marry. There, she seeks psychosocial counseling. Which of the categories describes Aliyah's status of displacement at time of report? Aliyah would be considered a foreign national. Now let's take a look at stage of displacement at time of incident. This data point refers to when the incident took place, before, during, or after a survivor was displaced from his or her home, or notes if he or she has never been displaced. There are 6 options in the GBVIMS: pre-displacement, during flight, during refuge, during return/transit, post-displacement, or not displaced/home community. Let's take a look at these definitions. Pre-displacement indicates that the incident occurred prior to the time that the survivor was displaced from her home. During flight occurred while the person was traveling from their home to the place of refuge. During refuge occurred during the period of time when the person was displaced. This includes both whether they were a refugee or an internally displaced person, or IDP. During return/transit occurred while the person was returning back to their home from their place of refuge. Post-displacement indicates that the incident occurred after the survivor returned to his or her home from their displacement. And not displaced/home community is for a person who at the time of report has never been previously displaced due to the effects of armed conflict, internal strife, systemic violations of human rights, or natural or man-made disasters. Let's practice with the stage of displacement at time of incident. Scenario 1. Aisha is raped in Damascus, her hometown. 1 week later, she is forced to leave because of the violence. Which of the categories describes Aisha's stage of displacement at time of incident? Aisha was pre-displacement when the incident occurred. Scenario 2. Farah is displaced by rebel fighting in her hometown. On her way to the border, she is physically abused by police. Which of the categories describes Farah's stage of displacement at time of the incident? Because Farah was on her way to the border, she was in flight when she was physically abused. So her stage of displacement would be in flight. Scenario 3. Abia is finally able to return home to Syria after living in a refugee camp for 3 years. After arriving safely at home, she is sexually abused by soldiers. Which of the categories describes Abia's stage of displacement at time of incident? Abia was back in her home country when she was sexually abused, so her status of displacement at time of incident would be post-displacement. Thank you for watching this video.